So, mm, so I would like to welcome Quincila for our today's session, and yeah, so begin with your introduction and presentation. Yeah, welcome, Quincila.
Awesome. Thank you, Swingla, for inviting me here today. And can you all hear me all right? It's dark here in the United States, so I'm not trying to speak too loud. But am I able to share my screen? Awesome. Okay. And are you all able to see my screen right now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So as mentioned, my name is Quincy, and I'm super excited to be here at the 2021 Virtual Explore Speaker Series to talk a little bit about climate change in the Himalayan region. And just a little disclaimer, this picture I didn't take, right? My friend Pamela from Zoom took this picture and I'm using it here. And so before I begin, I just want to say that although I've studied this region a lot, right, I'm not going to be able to bring a lot of information to today's call just because there's so much information, but I would be more than happy to talk to you all more about it in the future or after this presentation. And so I'm going to begin with a self-introduction here. So I recently graduated with my bachelor's degree in geography and political science, and I focus a lot of my education on climate change, right? And what causes climate change? How do people react to climate change? And at my university, I was a researcher at the Climate Change Research Center, and I help my teachers teach climate change in my classes. And I would be more than happy to share that experience with you all. Additionally, I was a School for International Training Nepal student during the fall of 2019, and I was in Nepal from September 2019 to December 2019. Some of you may be familiar with SIT. They're a wonderful program based in Kathmandu, and I was very lucky to be a student there. And during my time in Nepal, I was able to complete a research project in Sum Valley with Suringla. That's where Suringla and I met, and just to learn more about how the local people in Zoom are interpreting climate change, right? And what are some differences between local knowledge and, let's say, like academic knowledge here in the United States, which I will touch on later in my presentation. Furthermore, a little bit about my professional goals in the future. I hope to work in the international environmental law and policy field, right? I think it's important to address climate change globally. And so I'm hoping to get into a career soon that helps me do that. And lastly, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself, right? I'm Hmong American or Asian American in the US, and my parents immigrated from Laos. And the country of Laos is next to Thailand, and the Hmong people are the mountainous people of Laos. And so I think in that sense, I kind of have a similarity with you all because a lot of you come from Himalayan backgrounds and mountainous backgrounds, and I have a little bit of that information as well. And so let's get to the topic of today, right? I'm just going to talk a little bit about what is climate change. And so the points I have here is that the first one is climate change happens because of increased carbon dioxide. And of course, carbon dioxide is just one of many gases in the atmosphere that causes the earth to warm more. And you see my picture here to the right. I have a kind of common picture you would see a lot when you look at climate change on Google, and it's a bunch of like smoke in the air, right? All these chemicals in the air you see in industrialized places. And the impact of carbon dioxide in the air is that it captures more heat from the sun, right? And so while these carbon dioxides are more present on Earth, more sun are like there's gonna be more heat trapped. And so this is where the term kind of global warming comes from. And the cycle is very much complex, but I think this is one of the key points about climate change that not a lot of people know about, and something I find myself teaching a lot of students. The second point I have here is that climate change is caused by human activity. Right? Governments all over the world have issued that climate change is a emergency and a problem, and that humans need to address it because humans started it. And that would make a lot of sense, right? Because with industrialized cities and as our economy is growing and technology, more carbon dioxide is being used to build these things from companies. And so there's an increase in global warming. And the last point I have on this slide, which I also think is very important, is that the countries that are most responsible for climate change are the United States, Canada, and South Korea. And later in my slides, I will show you more about the rankings, and you will see there that Nepal is not even in the top 14, right? They're probably one of the countries that have released the least carbon dioxide into the air. Yet later you will see that the Himalayan region is one of the most rapidly changes regions in the world when it comes to climate change. But Nepal necessarily isn't responsible for those changes. It's these other countries, which is where things can get very interesting and very political. And so here I have a little diagram of what kind of global warming will look like and climate change looks like using this simple art. So you can imagine Earth inside a house, right? And then this house is warming up because of all the carbon dioxide and other chemicals put into the air. And so this heat is stored around the Earth, making it warmer. And to learn more about this effect, I recommend looking at or researching the greenhouse effect. And if you want more information about that in the future or after this, I'll be more than happy to share it with you all. And then as mentioned earlier, this is a kind of diagram of which countries have released the most carbon dioxide into the air or out into Earth. And this is, again, really important because CO2 or carbon dioxide is one of the main causes of climate change. And so when we look at responsibility, we need to look at what countries have done the most responsibility and which ones have done the least. And you see in these charts that countries like the United States, Canada, South Korea, Russia, and Japan have released a lot more carbon dioxide than other countries. And a country like Nepal is even up here, and it is actually pretty low on the list. And so when you look at those emissions, you really need to start thinking about responsibility and politics, right? And when the whole world is changing, who is responsible for finding the money and the actions to kind of address the problem? And on this slide, I have climate change impacts in the Himalayan region. And you can see here that I divided this slide into two boxes. The first is labeled according to the science, data, and research. This is kind of more about what I do, right? The things I do here in the United States, right? I read a lot, I look at the data, I talk to people who are outside of the region. And then here to the right, the slide is according to Himalayan people and native Himalayans. And this is kind of conversations this is information drawn from conversations I've had with Nepalese, Himalayans, especially when I was in Zoom, right? Those are my notes, and also looking at interviews, watching interviews, and trying to see like what is the local knowledge and what is the more like academic knowledge, and what ways do they relate or they differentiate. And immediately we see that in the science and the data, the Himalayas is one of the most fastest changing regions in the world due to the climate change, right? Due to global warming because of all the different elevation layers there. And then glaciers are melting at fast rates in the Himalayas. There's been changes in rainfall and snowfall. And then there's been animal migration and change in populations, such as Yatagumpa, which I know is a very popular topic and natural resource in the Himalayan region. And when you look at the local knowledge or the Himalayan people, the Himalayan region has changed in the last 30 years. Glaciers are melting at fast rates, changes in rainfall and snowfall patterns, and then there's also been notices of animal migration and change in populations, such as Yatagumpa. And I share this because you see that there's a lot of similarities, right? I think that when people think of climate change, they immediately go to the science, right? The research, the readings, when the local people, right? The people who live in this region have just as much knowledge and the same amount of knowledge and observations that these scientists do. And so this is just a way of like what I believe can help make this field and this topic more inclusive to people outside of academic spaces or people outside of school, right? Because I might be a college student, but I know so little about the issue, right? People from the Himalayas will know more than me, and I am informed by their observations, which is something I learned a lot when I was in Zoom. And then here is just an example of a glacier in the Himalayas. So you see here in 1921, this glacier in the mountains, there were a lot of snow-capped mountains, right? There's a lot of ice by the river valley, and this was taken in 1921. And the second picture is taken in 2009. And this is the same valley, right? But yet there's more water, there's less snow coverage, and this all changed within 100 years. And this 100 years may seem like a long time, right? You'd be like, oh yeah, like it makes sense why it changes in 100 years, like things change over time. But when you look at history of glaciers in this region, this change normally takes thousands of years to happen. Right? So it would normally take thousands of years for this picture to get to the second picture, but because of global warming and climate change, this has changed within just 100 years. And so these changes are happening fast and not following patterns that's been seen in history. And so I have here, why is climate change an important environmental issue to not just me, but to all of us? And the first point I have is that humans and animal migration is a thing, right? When an environment becomes unlivable, right? When animals or humans can't find food because of the changing environment or because of floods from glaciers, then they have to move. But moving is really hard, right? You need to have the money, you need to have the resources, and the same happens to both humans and animals. All over the world, people are moving, leaving their homes because they can't garden, right? They can't start farms, or there are no more animals to hunt. And so this becomes a very important issue to look at. Another point I have here is that there's been changes in Earth's ecosystems and natural environments, right? I think the glacier is just one of them that has been changing, but you can look at the ocean. You know, there's been a lot of reefs and corals that have been dying because of global warming, and so these things are changing. Different water resources are changing, so the amount of water you see that's been constant the last 10 years might be different because of the melting. And so we need to understand how these are changing, so especially farmers and people who live off the land can know when to farm, when not to farm, when to expect the water, and when to expect drought or no rain, because the agriculture season depends a lot on rainfall. And the third point I have here at the bottom is that human health and well-being is at risk. If people don't have access to water, if people don't have access to food, their health worsens as a result. And so I think just that alone should be an important, or just gives everyone a reason to take this issue seriously. And the last point I have here is that it's going to keep changing. Right? We're only beginning to see the start of climate change and the changes. These changes are gonna be changing even more, right? When you look at the literature, there's at least 100 more years of changing that's coming. So it's important to see what are these changes and how do we keep up and how do we get people engaged. And so the last slide here I have for you all talks about moving forward in the future, which are just some things that I've used a lot when doing this work and what I tell a lot of the students I've taught in the past. And the first part I have here is that to learn more about climate change and bring awareness to it, especially because it impacts so many people's lives, especially for those who come from like the Himalayan region, Himalayan mountains. Understanding this issue more might be able to help you explain what is going on to your parents or to older people, right? Because this information isn't shared a lot with locals, which is something I've noticed, and which is one reason why I'm here today, right? To share more about this information with everyone. Another point I have here is that you all bring important views and knowledge about climate change, especially because many of you come from areas that are already impacted by climate change. And so it goes back to what I shared earlier. Your observations matter, and they help inform scientists and policymakers on what's going on and how to address the issue. And then you and your community know more about climate change than I do, right? I'm from the United States. The Nepal is somewhere really far away from me. And so I can read all day, I can watch videos all day, but I still won't have the knowledge that you have, that your parents have. And so it's important that we all work together and inform each other on how to move forward. And then my last point here is to just get involved, right? Whether that be in politically, talk about it more with some friends, or join organizations to learn more about the environment and the issues and the challenges coming ahead. So that's all I have for you all today. That was kind of a lot of information, and I can talk pretty fast. So I welcome any questions or comments or just anything really. I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Priscilla, for this wonderful presentation. So we have a question. So first we will, Simidoka, are you going?
Hello, Quincy. And firstly, thank you so much for giving us some time so early in the morning. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions, and I'll begin with the first one. About the United States President Joe Biden. He assembled world leaders and raised the US target for cutting climate pollution in his initial 100 days of his administration. He also appointed some special team for the climate change. So my question is does this action or his decision impact the climate change globally, or is it only for United States?
My response to that question is both. Right, I think the United States is a country that the world always looks at, right? And that's because it's received a lot of power in the past from wars and so forth. So a lot of people all over the world look at the United States as a role model. So as President Joe Biden makes these decisions, we have people from around the world be, oh yeah, this is an important issue because you see the United States doing it, right? You see America doing it. So then people like to follow the footsteps. And in terms of in the United States itself, I think just having President Biden in the administration is leading to changes in climate and addressing these environmental issues, because as a president, he has the power to cancel or make decisions really fast, right? And so, for example, in the United States, a big issue is pipelines. And so pipelines are these kind of tubes that go underground that transport oil all across the United States. And a lot of times these pipelines leak and oil spills, right? And it goes into the soil, it gets into people's water, and people get really sick. So they're all over the United States, and a lot of Americans have been advocating, saying that President Biden, you have the power to cancel these pipelines, right? Stop these pipelines. And so the President Biden has done so. And that's something that President Trump wouldn't have done 2 years ago. And so this is just one example of having an important president help make those decisions. And this isn't to say President Biden is perfect at all costs. I know a lot of Americans are still hoping that he does more. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, of course it does. My second question is like, I'm a recent high school graduate, and of course, like after high school senior year, the college process, the application process is obviously very hectic for anyone. So like you who have been through that process, like what advice would you give to someone who is like currently in process of applying, or like someone who has already been admitted and then like is in process of selecting which college he or she should go? Like what advice would you give?
And have you applied or are you thinking about applying to colleges in the United States?
Yes,
I might have missed that part.
I have applied to few, but like like it's kind of hectic, and I'm confused between like where to go and like what factors should I consider while selecting colleges, and like so what advice would you give?
Yeah, I know I work a lot with college admissions, and so I'm super happy you asked that question. And so I know right now we are living in a time where your personal statements, like your essays, are everything. A lot of the U.S. education system has stepped away more from your grades, right? Stepped away more from your test scores, and more about your identity, right? And what unique perspective do you bring to United States schools? And so on that end, I think you should really go in about coming from Nepal, right? If you are Himalayan or Tibetan, talk about those identities and how it's so important for the US to have these people in the classroom, right? As someone who is in the US classroom, I think it's missing a lot of international perspective, right? And talk about um, how you bring international perspective, because as much as you need a US education, right, the US education also needs you, right? So that's how you want to approach, right? Be like, okay, you're gonna give me this education. This is what I give you. It's kind of like a negotiation. And so write your essays to the best you can, and really sell yourself off as someone to invest in. And if you want any help, please just contact me. I love to help people with the college and admissions, and I'll be happy to help you as well. And in terms of school choices, I think you should just reflect on like what you want. Like, do you want to do a lot of research, right? Research is just like doing a lot of reading, homework, working with professors, or do you want to start create networks and be in communities? And so that's where a small college might be better than a big college. And once that happens, those are going to be big factors. So thanks for asking your question, and please reach out, any of you, if you want any help with the college admission process.
Thank you so much.
So next we have Sindimalam.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Hello, Quincy. I'm really glad to meet you through this session. So my question to you is technology a boon to this environment? Like, how can the technology be helpful to the environment? And is technology a bane to the environment? Like, how can the technology be can cause a great distress to the environment?
I think technology is very important, and it's about how you use technology. So really good questions, by the way. I'm so impressed already by both of you. And so one thing about technology is that it requires natural resources to make, right? Like a computer that I'm using right now, it requires someone going to pick up the material and then using the energy to burn the carbon dioxide, which I told you all about, to build. And so that's where, like, if we advance technology, we need to see where it's being built and how we can build it differently so that it doesn't leave more carbon dioxide in the air. Another downside to technology is that it's not accessible to everybody. Right? When I was in Zoom, I learned a lot about internet access, electricity. Right? A lot of places in remote areas don't have access to technology. And so when people rely only on technology, they forget that there are still people out here in the world who don't have technology. And so as we use that, we need to be more mindful of who's getting technology and who's being heard from technology. And then I also think it's really useful, right? Because one thing technology can do is create like maps, right? And create information in a way that's quick and can be spread really fast. And so this is where you can bring awareness to climate change, right? There's been really cool technology being built to be like launched into space, launched into air to remove carbon dioxide from the air, right? And so it's really about how you use it. Right? You can use it for good or you can use it for bad. I know this is a very like boring saying, right? It can be used for good or it can be used for bad. And so it's important that people decide whether they want to use it for good and for bad. And when is it used for bad purpose and when is it used for good purpose?
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, in your opinion, like, what's the biggest environmental threat today?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest environmental threat today is actually environmental education, right? People are so surprised when I say that because they're like, wait, how about global warming or glaciers or all these dying animals? But I think at the end of the day, education is so important because a lot of this information on climate change and the environment isn't shared equally. Right? A lot of the language isn't translated to different languages. Right? A lot of people still don't know about it. And so how you teach something it matters because that's how you get people involved in the issue. I know one thing really that's a big problem in the community that like studies climate change is that it's very limited. Right? There's not a lot of people involved, and that's because they use a lot of language that and terminology that people don't understand. Right? I went to school for 4+ years, and I still don't know some of these terms, and so people expect me to know them, but I don't know them. And so, how is someone who hasn't even gotten like an American or an English education going to learn? And so, I think this is something that people who study climate change need to do better, right? And I know when I was in Zoom Valley, one of the things I learned is that like this term climate change, right, global warming isn't a term in the valley because scientists haven't done a good job at sharing this term with the people. And I remember I was talking to one of my interviewees and they told me like, Quincy, there's so many scientists who come here all the time, questions ask questions about our lives, but they never tell us where it goes. And so like that's very frustrating, right? If you just have all these people come in, but they never tell you what they're doing with that information or giving back to the community. And so I think we need to take education more equally, right? And be thankful for the people who are teaching us. It's not just scientists, not just Americans or Europeans who know the knowledge, but everyone knows the knowledge and should get involved.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Lakotama, are you here?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, Quincy. Nice to have you here. So I wanted to ask this question. We know that like climate change is a very big threat for the world, like for the whole nation. I mean, for the whole Earth, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, how we can do, like, as a single person, as a like individual, what can we do to like control it? I know it's a small step, but it may change the climate change. So I want to ask, what can we do?
Yeah, great question. My immediate response to that is that we can't blame ourselves too much as an individual for not doing a lot of the change. I think there's a lot of pressure to like not use plastic, right? To not eat this or to not buy this, but it's really hard to when you come from an environment that teaches you to do that. And so the first step is to realize that it's our governments that need to change, right? It's the way like things are produced that needs to change, right? It's the system that we all live under that needs to change. And that's something that the entire community need to work on and not just one person, right? Because the community isn't one person, right? Community is a lot of people. And so first, like you always just gotta tell them like, I'm doing my best, right? You gotta tell yourself you're doing your best. And until the community, the world changes, you can't do too much or you can't punish yourself for not being the best individual. But in terms of individual steps, I would say good ways are just to educate, right? Share this information with others, talk about it, um, bring awareness to the issue to people who are in power, right? People who are in positions to um, make change or policies. For example, in the U.S., like President Biden, right? It was a bunch of individuals who advocated for President Biden to get him in to change climate change, right? And so it's a community work, and to really just give back to the community and learn from the community. There's gonna be a lot of people who tell you like, use plastic straw, no, use reusable straws, or don't use plastic, right? But then it's not feasible, right? It's not possible, right? The whole world uses plastic. And like, as an American, right, I can't tell you to not use plastic. When you remember those that diagram I shared you all, like the United States has released the most carbon dioxide, right? It would be hypocritical for me to be like, don't use plastic when my country has released the most harmful air into the sky, right? So you gotta be keep that in mind, right? If someone from the United States says that to you, be like, Nepal hasn't even released a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. It's the United States or it's Europe. And so they gotta look at that as well. Great question.
Thank you. Yes.
And Samki?
Hello, Quincila. Hello. So far, I'm really having the session as a very informative, and I have a couple of questions, and I want to ask a few of them. So my first question for you is, so like, I hope you know Greta Thunberg, right? Yes, right. So, though there are a lot of environment activists, but she became very famous at such a very young age. So, like, in your opinion, how did she become so influential in the society? That's I want to know from your side.
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of people know Greta Thunberg, and that's something that often can be used to talk about the environment. But I have I usually have a different stance on Greta Thunberg. I think in response to your question, some of the things that led to her having the fame she has today is that she's from a European country, right? European countries normally have more focus in the spotlight, and so that definitely helped her um, come into the spotlight. She also came from a lot of wealth, right? So those monies and those networks definitely helped propel her into being famous, but also her cause, right? Being a young person, being in the environment. And a lot of young people are told all the time that they can't be smart, that they can't have a passion, right? They'll tell you, you need to be an adult to do these things, but a lot of times we can learn from younger people like us, right? Older people can learn from us too. And so I think her message saying that young people are smart and are activists really resonated with a lot of young people worldwide, and in doing so, she was able to build her fame. But Greta Thunberg is just one young activist of many across the world who come from countries like um, Nepal, the Philippines, right, Thailand, right, Brazil. All these young people have always been here alongside Greta Thunberg, but the camera always seems to focus on her the most. And I believe the camera should be open more, right? Even Greta Thunberg has shared that message with everybody as well, right? Greta Thunberg has said, "Don't just focus on me, right? I'm a girl from Europe, right? I don't need this camera. I don't need the spotlight. It's people from different parts of the world that need the spotlight, who are just as informative, right? Have who are so wise that can spread the message as well." This is why I tell you all, get engaged, right? Get involved, because you all have so much information, so much knowledge that someone like me from the United States don't have.
Okay. Yeah.
Great question.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful answer, actually. And my second question is, I hope it's not like a question that kind of offends you, but I think it's a bit relatable. Since I've seen a lot of videos in YouTube, like you know, the white people bullying Asian people in right foreign countries. So like being a kind of Asian student in US, right? Like, do you face any bully, or did you had any difficult times?
Yeah, great question. I don't think there are any bad questions. So this is a reminder to you all to like don't be scared to ask any question. But yes, I think in the United States there are a lot of racial issues, as you see on YouTube, right? White people have been harming people of color, right? Asian people, black people for hundreds of years. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people around the world get access to or don't talk about. So I'm glad that you're asking this question a lot. And so in terms of my own experience, right, it's been really interesting because there have been some people, like white teachers, who immediately think I'm smart, right, because I'm Asian. I'm sure you all have heard that. They're like, oh, like Asians are smart everywhere, so this student must be smart. So there's that stereotype. But then there's also the stereotype that because I'm Asian, I can't speak English well, or that I can't articulate a response or give a presentation on climate change. Right? A lot of white people have told me, "Wow, Quincy, you speak English so well. You're so smart." And I think like, what does that matter, right? And even if I don't speak English well, like I can still be smart. Like we're all smart. And so my parents actually they were refugees, and so they don't speak a lot of English, right? They have accents, and so when people meet my parents too, they're like, how do they raise a son who speaks English so well? So there's those remarks that can be really frustrating, right? And that identity is definitely an important part in all my life, you know. And although I haven't faced any like harmful violence, it does exist, right? And it's existed for a long time before those videos became viral, right? You know, with the coronavirus too, right? A lot of Asians all around the world have been targeted, have been like, oh, you have coronavirus, you have the Chinese virus. And that's something that happens a lot in the United States. And not a lot of people pay attention to it, right? Because um, Asians are kind of just forgotten in social media and in these issues. And so it's a very, that identity to me is very important, right? And so, because it impacts how I move around the United States, right? My relationship with white people and so forth. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, and yeah, so my last question is that since I think most of us here are very young, like maybe in future we might study in foreign country or possibly in US. So, like, if we become that, if you go in that process, then do you have like any kind of tips or suggestions or uh, advice or something? Like, I want you to give at least 3 if possible.
I think my first advice is that you're more than your country, right? I think when people look at international students, they're all like, oh, you're from this country. Tell me about Nepal. Tell me about your country, right? You're kind of seen as like a diplomat, right? And although you are a diplomat, you still have different parts of yourself that you bring, right? For example, if you're Nepali and you're a woman, that is an identity to bring, right? You're Nepali and Himalayan, that's an identity to bring. So talk about that, right? Talk about what makes you different. Talk about how you're not like every other Nepali, right? Like you're different and unique. So really focus on that. My other thing is to reach out, right? Reach out for people who've been through the process. For example, like me, you are all more than welcome to reach out to me whenever and have them help you with your application because there's certain language that colleges look for that they don't really tell students, which right, it's so stupid that like there's like these like kind of secrets in the application process that aren't really told. And so try to meet people if you can who can help you with that. And then my third one is to go for it, right? Just apply for any colleges, try your best, right? The worst that can happen is a no. And I know for international students, especially in the US, college can be really, really expensive. right? And so like if it's try to find any finances, you know, try to find any sponsors if you can, and if it's too expensive, then it's okay, right? Apply somewhere else that's more affordable, because like a U.S. education isn't like the best education, right? Education all over the world is good.
Thank you.
So do we have any more questions?
I have one additional question. So like in recent years, the thrifting or like this reselling your closet has come to like, it has become so popular, you know, reselling your closet. It says like it reduces the textile demand, and it also reduces the carbon emission. And also like, is there any scientific research or like has like the reselling your closet and not buying a new one, has there any scientific proof that it really helps with the reduction of carbon emission?
That is a very good question, right? And like I think my immediate response is kind of both, right? First of all, like because you're not, when you reuse clothes, then you're not buying new clothes, right? So then you're not you're not supporting the companies that make those clothes. But at the same time, like those clothes is already made. You know, like the company has already made that clothes, right? And so it's hard to control that. And from the best of my understanding, there hasn't been any like hard scientific proof that says that like reselling your clothes is the best way. You know, maybe on a community scale, right, you might use less, but again, like to the point I made earlier about individual action and community action, right? Climate change is a very community action issue. And so until an entire community resells their clothes, right, or like don't buy any new clothes, that's where the real change is going to impact. And so you can do that on the individual level, but it's most important that that happens on the community level. And a lot of people have already done that for thousands of years. You know, it isn't anything new, right? Like this notion that you need to wear new clothes every day is still really new, right? Like I wear the same shirt like 3 times a week, you know, and that's okay, right? That's more sustainable, right? Than like buying new clothes or having too many clothes. And so yeah, the fashion industry can lead to a lot of unsustainable and can cause climate change because it's always telling you that you need more clothes, right? You need more clothes, you need more this, and so that results in climate change because the technology and carbon dioxide. If you just keep your clothes and don't fall into that trap, then you are doing better and not falling into those systems.
Thank you so much.
I also have one question. First of all, like good evening to all and good morning to Quincy. And my question is like, if you were like told to give advice or like suggestion to the world leaders regarding this climate change, then what would you advise them, like, or what suggestion would you give to them?
I would tell them to listen to the people, right? Listen to the locals, right? Politicians are just like me in this position, right? Like they read things, right? They look at data, they look at numbers. They don't actually talk to the people, right? And like those people are gonna be the ones that are gonna give you motivation. For example, before I came to Nepal, I read a lot of research about the Himalayas, climate change, right? Global warming, glacier melt. And so, yeah, like that was informative, but I didn't learn about the world. I didn't learn about climate change until I came to Nepal. So I went to Zoom Valley and met Seringla and talked to the people about what they need and what's going on. And so, you know, like world leaders normally stick with just world leaders, right? And because of that, they're kind of just in like a bubble, so they don't talk to people outside of that. And so they need to talk to people outside of that, especially people who are community leaders, right, in their own communities.
Like I have one more question, and that is like you told that you visited Nepal in Sum Valley, and like I would like to know like what was your best part of coming here in Nepal? best memory?
I miss the tea culture a lot. Like milk tea, you can just stop by the street and buy tea and sit with a friend for hours, and that was so fun. I miss the street food, like laughing and pani puri. I can't find it anywhere in the United States, and I miss it so much. And I think just all the people that I made friends with, and I really hope to come back soon. I know I volunteered at the Snow Leopard Hostel in Kathmandu, and I helped the students with English a little bit there. We're Himalayan youth as well from Lima, I believe. And so that was super fun. And like learning about them and helping them with English and just drinking tea with everyone. Because in the US, everything is so fast, right? They're like, do this, do this, do this. Like you're drinking tea while running to class or something, right? You don't really get to sit down with someone and have a good conversation. So I miss that lifestyle a lot.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
Hi,
Oh, yes.
can I have one question?
Sure.
This is about like present context. So how can we persuade people and the government to concentrate on climate issue while people are so focused on like pandemic? So how can we persuade them?
I think to persuade them, you need to, first of all, get the numbers, right? Get the audience, get a lot of people who care about the same things. And when you show up in a big population of people, that gets political leaders a visual of like how many people care about this, right? And in terms of like how do you get people to care about it, right? In terms of climate change, like climate change impacts everything, right? The environment is impacting everything, especially when you look at COVID. One of the reasons why COVID, COVID as a virus has become so prominent is because viruses are better in warmer temperatures, right? As these temperatures are changing, these viruses are becoming more immune to these changes, or they're mutating as well. And so with climate change and with the environment changing, these viruses are changing as well. And so they can attack both like global pandemic and global climate change when seeing the two issues as connected. And, like in the US, right, climate change has led to people having worse lungs because they breathe in a lot of toxic air, air pollution. And so COVID is a virus that attacks your lungs, right, and your breathing. And so people are dying more because they don't have the healthy lungs to defend against COVID. And that's because of carbon dioxide in the air. That's because of climate change. And so we need to start convincing our leaders to see these issues as connected and not separate issues, right? Addressing one leads to the addressing of the others. And the world works in very connected ways, right? It's not just yes, no, right? There's yes, no, maybe, or. And so seeing the complexity of that is important.
Thank you.
So any more?
Yeah, I have one question. Okay, so Quincy, I'm always interested on people's perspective on life. So this question might be a bit tricky and philosophical. So the question is like, if your life is a cycle, then what is the break?
May you elaborate a little bit more about that question, right? If my life was a cycle, what is my break? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Okay. So I mean, like, if your life is a cycle, you kept moving, right? But sometimes something happened to us and we have to give a break. Like, so what is that break? Like, what makes you stop in life?
I think what makes me stop in life is talking to people. I know that is very like a boring answer, but like actually sitting down and talking and meeting with people, right? And learning about their stories, learning about their struggles, right? Learning about who they are, because I think that is very humbling, right? And it makes me feel really grateful to be where I am and who I am, and it makes me just be thankful of all the people who have made my life possible. And I know in my life, I feel like I'm always moving super fast, right? Everybody knows I'm always doing something. I'm always in motion, either working a project, doing work, and doing school. That like it becomes such a cycle that I forget like who I'm doing it for and why I'm doing it. So that's why like I need people in my life to be like, Quincy, like let's talk. Quincy, let's meet new people, and that helps me realize that like life is really just about building relationships with people and not like a project or not getting a good grade or not just a job.
Thank you so much for this very beautiful answer, actually.
So I see a question in the group chat. It says, if you were Joe Biden, what will you do to make an impact on climate change according to your own observations? So you all know that diagram I showed you earlier and how the US has produced the most carbon dioxide in the air, which causes climate change, right? I would allocate funds to countries that have suffered from climate change from countries like the United States, right? Because the United States have gained a lot of money, right, from those industries. And so I would want to redistribute my wealth and help other countries address climate change without asking for anything in return. Because the United States, as a country that has released the most carbon dioxide in the air into the world, has a responsibility to address it without expecting anything in return from other people who haven't done that.
So was that the last question, or do we have more? So since we come to the end of the session, and Priscilla, thank you so much. I know it's very early there, and sorry for disturbing us late. And yeah, it was really wonderful session with you. And thank you so much, Priscilla, for joining us and for your very insightful information. And hope our students will get in contact with you to discuss, to know more about you. And thank you so much for joining us, Priscilla.
Yeah, thank you all for making time for me throughout your busy day to listen to me talk. Seringla, thank you for thinking of me. I was really nervous coming in, so I hope the presentation went well. You all had asked wonderful questions, and please reach out to me for any help. And yeah, I think as you left, I was looking at the website. It's such a great organization, and so I'm super happy to know that you're all somewhat connected to it. So yeah, thank you all for your time. And Seringla, as always, let's stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Priscilla. See you later.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye.
Okay, so how was the session? So can you guys just unmute a little bit and just explain?
Amazing. Very interactive.
Okay, I think yeah, left, right. So is there anyone new participant? Okay, guys, let me stop this recording.